be aware that this is not going to be a tourism brochure for Moscow. Moscow. Absolutely 0 points of interest will be mentioned in this video. Hey all, here I am in the town of Moscow, Idaho. It's got this little downtown. It's like those historic downtowns that you're used to, except it's still alive. You know, it's not just novelty shops and the real business happens elsewhere. The real business of the town happens here. Population of about 25,000, quite small, but it is where the University of Idaho is. And so it's got a college town feel. Some good restaurants and whatnot. In fact, I just came from a delicious burger at a place called Tapped. Saw a dude that I had gone to school with at a private school here in the area called New St. Andrews. In fact, that's the building right there. I want to do this video telling you guys a bit about this town and what it meant to me. So I go to Tapped, I see an old classmate. You know, the hugs ensue, the communications. Almost 20 years later, right? The double take he does when he sees me. It's that kind of town. It's a town where people stay. It's a town where people know each other, where people have known each other's families for generations. And yet it's growing and cosmopolitan. So I'm at this Tapped place, and I see someone else I know. She's in the kitchen of the restaurant. She's been baking sourdough bread as an experiment. I've got 2 loaves of sourdough bread to take with me, just given to me. Now, I just want to be clear, it's not the restaurant's food, so no one's giving me free restaurant stuff. Don't go to Tapped to ask for free stuff. But yeah, just, it doesn't surprise me. It just fits right in. It's that kind of place. So, Moscow, dare I say it, is the place where I became a man. Yeah, that's fair to say. Obviously, if my dad's watching, I know I had plenty of growing to do after. But yeah, for real, yo. So Moscow, I'll tell you the reasons why we moved here. But Moscow is actually the birthplace of my oldest daughter. And now she's interested in going to college here at New St. Andrews. So we moved to Moscow, Kimberly and I, as a young married couple, because we had been tracking some of the stuff that was happening with a local church, Christ Church, and some of the stuff they were putting out, magazines, articles, because remember, this is late 90s, early 2000s when I was following that stuff. And I was tired of going to a state school. I went to the University of Florida, where my dad had been a professor, and, well, yeah, it was terrible for lots of reasons. That could be a separate video. But I said, you know what? I'm going to do something that I think will be awesome. Just darn the torpedoes. So, yeah, we came out here, and it changed our lives. And it wasn't the school that changed our lives. Although, as I said, it was so wonderful to see some old classmates and whatnot. We made lifelong friendships in just the space of a year. We were only here for a year. So I want to tell you guys about how this town changed our lives and had a lasting impact on us and on our family. And obviously, by this town, I don't mean the municipality of Moscow. I mean the people. So we were a young family when we moved out here, right? Just the 2 of us, Joffrey and Kimberly. And we were deeply impacted by the Christian community here in Moscow, by the church, and in particular by people at Christ Church in Moscow. And that was right at the time when they planted their first little plant here in town, Trinity, and we went to Trinity as well during that time. And so this holds for both of those congregations. They were such an example of hospitality. That's the first way that they changed us. And, I'm Brazilian. You guys all know that. We spent plenty of time living in the South. So hospitality is actually something that comes relatively naturally to us. What we saw an example of was two things. One was thought out Christian hospitality. And the other, and if any Muscovites are watching this, it might, feel like a little bit of a tweak, but doing hospitality, even if it's awkward. So those are the two examples that we had. The first one, we became much more deliberate in our hospitality and celebrations. One of the adjustments in marriage that Kimberly and I had was the spontaneity of how I liked to show hospitality, and that never went away. We kept that, but we were also much more thoughtful and celebrating things like baptisms. We just lose track of the calendar as Americans, and we lose track of events, and we flatten everything. And here they did such a good job of celebrating all the worthy things, all the things that we're grateful to God for, while maintaining a quotidian, everyday, celebratory, grateful attitude. It was fabulous. So seeing that modeled, people celebrating particular events, was a great example for us, and we have done that ever since. The other thing was even when awkward. So one of the coolest things that we experienced here, this is North Idaho. It's the West. Not necessarily famous for hospitality. And you could tell sometimes. You could just, see a little bit of an awkwardness. Like, we're doing this, we're trying this on, but we're like serious about it, we're committed about it, and we're going to make it happen. And so in some ways that made it all the more pleasant, because you could see the earnestness. And, that's not a goal to be earnest or to be efforting in hospitality, but, it felt kind of nice that, hey, you're being made a priority, and people are being made a priority, even if it doesn't come naturally. And that's a great lesson for anybody. I'm going to get out of the wind here. Can I even stand up straight? Boom. So, and I've come back a couple of times in the intervening years, and I'm back here with my family. It has become more natural. It's not the same Christian community here in Moscow that I knew. People are, it's just, there's a comfort in how people are, at least we've been received this time around, that I think reflects 20 years of being thoughtful about hospitality, and real change has happened. It may sound weird to you to think about hospitality as being something that people say, we're going to get better at it. We're going to be deliberate about it, thoughtful about it, and we're going to make it happen, and we're going to become awesome at it. It's one of those things that we like to label as spontaneous or natural. Well, guess what? I've seen it with my own eyes. You can get better at it. You can make feasting and welcoming happen. That was the first one. Oh man, it's windy out there. Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is community. It's a small town. People are used to living with each other through thick and thin. You're just part of the landscape and of life. And that small town aspect, combined with the purposeful efforts of many Christians here in town to live in community and to be engaged with each other, is just remarkable to see It was remarkable to see during our time here, and it's been remarkable to see as time passes, how relationships are renewed, restored, how they shift, but how people are still in each other's lives, and how people can say things and do things, and there's a return interaction that may be positive or negative or whatever it is. But there's a feeling of permanence to it that I think is a good example to all of us, and was a good example to us. I was brought up in such a way, we moved every year. And so, to this day, this is just a part of my makeup. I leave people behind, and I'm okay with it. So that's always a temptation when, dealing with people that I have community with. And so, and I'm not saying that you always have to stick with people through thick and thin, but when your mode of being is such that you tend to stick with people, to come back around, that's just a good, solid example. And there's something noble and generous about it. The third thing that was life-changing for us here was church, and how you do church. Woo! Now there's a phrase that can be quite annoying, doing church. And yet here I am using it on you. And I choose it manfully because it is what I mean. I don't mean just the worship service. I don't mean just the institution, or just the life together. Simply the interactions. I mean all of it together. And so now I'm talking specifically about Christ Church, and not just about the ambiance of Moscow. So the music here is amazing. And by that I don't mean performance-wise. I mean gusto-wise and ubiquitousness-wise. The music is everywhere. People sing all the time. But they sing in a deliberate way, much like the hospitality. Here we learned, this is not something Christians have to do, but it made our lives with God and our family life better. People here sing before meals. A lot of folks do. Certainly at Christ Church, it's a very common thing. We learned to do that here. Is that a complex idea? No. But I hadn't seen that before. But people sing before meals before they pray. We began to do that. People at this church involve their kids in everything. It was the first time we had seen that, in absolutely everything. And for us, that became a priority. As I said, 2 weeks after my eldest was born, we moved away. And ever since then, we haven't sent our kids to children's church, to the children's sermon. The children have been with us in the service, the whole service, the whole time, ever since they were born. And the feeling of participation the children get as being part of the people of God is something that is absolutely priceless. And people also were models to us. All of this is without knowing. People were just doing their thing, and we were watching and learning. It's not easy to have a 2-year-old in the service. So seeing how people went through the process of training their kids to be in the service, their really little ones, and weren't embarrassed, and how there was a culture of the church that accepted that as part of just the church life, changed our lives, changed our expectations, changed what we thought was possible. The last thing I want to talk about, and how our time in Moscow gave us examples that impacted and changed our lives, is in talking about Christian engagement with the culture. First of all, one of the things that attracted me here in the first place were that so many people in the Christ Church sphere here in Moscow have been talking about Christian culture and building Christian culture. and that was very attractive. And the idea that Christian culture was a real thing was revolutionary for me. And then coming here and actually seeing it being deliberately, once again, the word deliberate keeps popping up, being put into practice with the idea that it could have a life of its own and that it could interact with the world in such a way that would expand the kingdom of Jesus Christ. That the kingdom would have a culture centered around worship. So here, with that building of culture, what I saw modeled was generosity and chivalry. I come from a family that was intellectually rigorous and rejoiced in debate. And then seeing that spirit in a Christian culture in such a way that it was just the idea of chivalry. You are strong, but you're also kind. And so seeing that worked out in public interactions, in debates and publications, but especially like in actual physical relationships, physical interactions here in the town, was again an example for us. And that was one of the things, it may sound like we've been kind of keeping track of what's been happening in the town after we left, and we kind of have been. Why? Because there are so many people who are active in publishing and creating art. N.D. Wilson, for example, I often talk about his work. If you've been following the channel, he's in this town, and there are many others. Movies that come out that we watch, books that come out that we read, and it's robust and it's kind. And that's a difficult thing to do, to be uncompromising yet generous. And there were many people here, there are many people here who are an example to Kimberly and I about how to be that way, how to be uncompromising yet generous. And that's something we've tried to pass on to our kids. So as I said at the beginning, this is not going to be a tourism brochure about Moscow. And also, this video has not been about all the Christians in Moscow. I know there are many others. This video has been about the impact that particular churches and a particular Christian community in this town had on us. So my hope for this video, well, first is that the folks in that Christian community, whether we knew you or not, I hope you see this video, and I want you to know that we're grateful. We're very thankful for the example that you were for us. Our time here was a fundamental part of the start of Kimberly and my life together, and you were a wonderful example for us. And we know that, in our travels, God has seen fit to make us examples to others, to younger folks. And so, in a small way, many of you, even whose names I don't know, have been spiritual fathers to us. So, thank you, and I hope you see this. The other thing, I guess, for my regular viewers, I'm not suggesting that you move to Moscow, Idaho. But I would like you to think about whether your church has a culture, is a culture, whether it is Catholic, ecumenical, I don't know how you want to put it, but whether it interacts with other churches and other Christians in such a way that is constructive, in such a way that builds. Does your church engage with the world having an alternative beyond, hey, just leave the world, leave everything behind? People think that following Jesus means abandoning everything, and they cite chapter and verse. Well, I could cite chapter and verse at you, telling you that following Jesus means building up his kingdom, and that the kingdom comes to earth. So I would urge you and ask you to go to Scripture and see what you could be building. Ask yourself if you and your church are building something positive, something robust, something with life on this earth, something that you can give to your children. So those are my hopes. This is just, at the end of the day, a town with people in it. These are churches with people in them. Plenty of faults, but wonderful examples. And so it had a big impact in our lives, and I wanted to share that with you guys. Peace of Christ be upon you.